Many have wondered, what was the star that brought the wise men to the baby Jesus? Recently has been circulating that December 21st, 2020, which is winter solstice, will have a unique event in the stars that hasn't happened for 800 years and is being called the Christmas star or the Star of Bethlehem. This event is where Jupiter and Saturn, the two largest planets in our solar system, are very close together, looking like a single star and appears very bright. But is this the star that guided the wise men to the baby Jesus? According to astronomers, these two planets have not been this close for 800 years, which is true. However, they do meet every 20 years. The unique thing about this year is that they will be just 0.1 degree apart. That is 1/5 the diameter of the full moon, to put that into perspective. The next time they will be this close is another 60 years from now on March 15th, 2080. So did this event create a celestial event people now call the Star of Bethlehem? Many have speculated about what the Magi saw up in the heavens that led them to Christ. But this brings up an important point. Who saw the Star of Bethlehem? Most people don't realize that of those recorded in the Bible, it was only the wise men that actually saw the star, no one else. As Latter-day Saints, we know that there are those in the American continent that also saw the new star. With software such as Stellarium, we can now plot the exact positions of stars, constellations, and planets exactly as they would have appeared on any given day in history, anywhere in the world. This has advanced how we can look at things such as the Christmas star. But this requires that we know a specific date. What date do we need to know? Well, we need to know what specific day Christ was born on, and unfortunately, we don't. Also, there continue to be quite a bit of debate around this subject. Most everyone now agrees that Christ was not born on 0. Now, I'm not sure whether to say AD or BC, since our entire calendaring system is based on his birth, but this is right. We are likely off some amount of time. Some of the events comes from non-biblical records, and then we can correlate those events to events that happen in the Bible. For example, it is generally agreed that Herod the Great died in 4 BC. However, Matthew and Luke both state that Herod the Great was the ruler over Judea at the time of Christ, when he was born. You see the problem. If the statement is true, then how could Christ be born 4 years after Herod dies? So exact dates are important when trying to use modern methods to determine astrological events, and there are discrepancies all over the place. Historical records come down to 2 dates for the death of Herod the Great. One is 4 BC and the other one is 1 BC. When we overlay the narrative of Christ's birth, these 2 stories converge in Matthew chapter 2, which is the story of the wise men. As you will remember, the wise men see a star in the east, and they now know that the Savior has come to the world. When they get to Jerusalem, they seek out Herod, who is the king, and ask where the king of the Jews is. Herod didn't know about the star, nor had anyone seen it. He asks his chief priests and scribes about where the baby is to be born, and they answer Bethlehem. Herod asked the wise men to come back after they had found Jesus, and let him know where he can find the baby. Of course, the wise men were warned in a dream about not returning to Herod, and they departed, quote, another way. During the visit with Herod, he asked the wise men when they saw the star. While the scriptures don't tell us their answer, we presume they saw the star 2 years earlier, because when Herod commands the slaughter of the innocents, it states that he had directed them to kill the male children 2 years and younger. There are several big assumptions we make from these accounts as we try to determine a date. First, just because Herod ordered the death of 2-year-olds and younger doesn't mean the star really showed up 2 years prior. Knowing the paranoia that Herod had, it wouldn't surprise anyone if it were just months or even 1 year prior and he had ordered an additional year just for good measure. We don't have any idea where the wise men came from, therefore we don't know how long their journey would have taken. We assume they left right after they saw the star, but there's no evidence of that. Clearly, they lived outside of the realm of Herod, but could have been from almost anywhere, and their journey could have been anything from weeks to years. As I mentioned, Herod's death date is in question. His children claim their reigns began 4 BC. However, some scholars believe that they claimed this prior to their father's death, either to ensure the legitimacy or due to their father's severe illness near the end of his life. We also have the record of Josephus, a Jewish priest, scholar, and historian, who relates Herod's death to a lunar eclipse and Passover. Historically, this lunar eclipse was believed to be the one that happened in 4 BC. However, more recently, there were 2 other lunar eclipses discovered, if that's the right term for it, that both happened in 1 BC, one of which is described as a spectacular full eclipse. The other one that year and also the one in 4 BC were not full eclipses. The 1 BC eclipse may make more sense, as other records also say that Herod lives the last part of his life in Jericho while being ill. Yet the account with the wise men happens in Jerusalem, while he appears to be in good health, at least physically. So we have Herod's death, either 4 BC or 1 BC. We have Christ's birth at 0 to 2 years prior to that time. So we have a potential date range for the birth of Christ between 6 BC and 1 BC. Well, as you can see, there is a lot that can happen in that time astrologically. But as Latter-day Saints, we know that there's another record that we can use to help in this effort. The Book of Mormon also records the new star, and we know that it is 600 years after Lehi leaves Jerusalem. But perhaps more important than that, we have the account of a day, night, and a day that appears as one day in the Americas that also happens at Christ's birth. This event may be the same event that others around the world saw. Some have associated a supernova or hypernova as the event that happened at Christ's birth. As you would imagine, these are somewhat difficult to trace back through time, although there are some scientific ways that they can do this. And it appears that there was a supernova which astronomers believe happened on February 23rd, 4 BC, known as the Hulse-Taylor pulsar. There are also historical accounts of this and perhaps a second supernova in that same year. The other occurred on April 24th, although some historians wonder if these 2 events are actually the same event misrecorded. These supernovas were recorded in China, Korea, and Palestine. Could this be the same event the Nephites saw in the Americas that caused the day, a night, and a day without any darkness? While both dates could work, the April 24th 4 BC date has a perfect alignment for the supernova to create a day during the night in North America, beginning at 9 o'clock p.m. just after the sun sets. The bright light from the Aquila constellation would provide light during the entire night. That is the constellation that they believe this supernova came from. So back to what the Star of Bethlehem really was. Well, the first theory is that this supernova was the star. The burst of light that saved the believing Nephites could have become the new star. Supernova can create new stars. The supernova was recorded to have come from the Aquila constellation. It is interesting because it says they originally saw the star in the east. During the reported supernova, the Aquila constellation rises in the east and sets in the west. Then note in Matthew 2, verse 9 later, when they were in Jerusalem heading towards Bethlehem, the star, quote, went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was, which was Bethlehem, which is south of Jerusalem. So at this point, if this theory is true, the Aquila constellation would need to be south of Jerusalem, which it was later in the night. So the wise men followed the star to find Jesus once they left Herod in Jerusalem, and it appears to have not been visible for some time because they also say, quote, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. So the star wasn't always visible even to them. The star also appears to move, quote, till it came and stood over where the young child was. But this can be explained by the rotation of the earth. This constellation does move and drops into the horizon, perhaps right over where the baby Jesus was resting. So perhaps the Star of David is a star that went supernova and then turned into the new star. Likewise, these could have been 2 different events that occurred at the same time. Perhaps the supernova did cause the night without darkness for the Nephites in the Promised Land, but on the same day, a new star appears which has another explanation. This is where the recent article about planetary conjunction comes in. Planetary conjunction happens when 2 planets in our solar system, usually the brightest and largest, appear to be very close to one another, creating the illusion of a single bright star for a period of time. This effect can last from days to over a month. These events do happen quite regularly. As it turns out, there was a conjunction on December 25th, 6 BC. This particular event would have happened in the southern sky, and if the wise men had followed it from Jerusalem towards Bethlehem, it would appear to set in Bethlehem. However, this does have some flaws in it. First, this particular conjunction doesn't have the planets very close together. They would not have looked like a single star. Also, as LDS, we don't believe that Christ was born on December 25th, although it is when we celebrate his birth. Also, the wise men reported the star to be in the east, and this is in the south. Lastly, the wise men presumably made it to Jerusalem a while after the star appeared, so this event would likely have passed by the time they got there. We are talking about this planetary conjunction in 2020 because it is the closest these two planets have been in 800 years, and it is happening on winter solstice, December 21st, 2020. In reality, these same two planets do this every 20 years, and they will be even closer in 2080. Happening on winter solstice is just a coincidence that's happening this year, and conjunctions happen between a variety of planets on a regular basis. So in reality, this is another way a new star could appear in the heavens for a period of time. Others claim a comet was the new star seen in the heavens at Christ's birth. This could certainly explain the new star, but the event the Nephites saw would again have to be a separate event altogether, which is certainly possible as the comet couldn't create a night without darkness unless it was extremely close to the Earth, and then it would be going so quickly it wouldn't last all night. So the supernova, or something like it, does appear to be the best explanation for what the Nephites saw. A comet does have some merit for another reason. If there was a comet at this time, we should see it on our modern-day stellarium software, and there isn't one. Halley's comet was visible in 12 BC, but that doesn't align with our dates. Chinese and Korean stargazers did see a comet in 5 BC that appeared to have no movement for a period of 70 days. This was in fact described as one that, quote, hung over a city. But we know of the orbits and movements of comets, so why don't we have record of this comet that the Chinese and the Koreans saw? One theory is that this same comet that was seen in 5 BC by the Chinese and the Koreans was the Star of David at the time of Christ's birth, and it is also the asteroid that strikes the American continent at the time of Christ's death. The event described in the Book of Mormon in 3 Nephi 8, in my opinion, could really only be caused by a meteor strike. A comet that strikes the Earth 34 years later wouldn't be trackable today, which could explain the Star of David and also a poetic justice for the wickedness among the Nephites and Lamanites at the time of Christ's crucifixion. This same event could cause the darkness for the final 3 hours prior to Christ's death on the cross in Jerusalem. I know it wouldn't have to be a meteor strike and that God can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, but he usually uses natural means to bring about his purposes. Some people think that means that we are taking something away from God, or that it really isn't God creating these events. To the contrary, I believe these are one and the same, and it is a greater testament to God's power having architected these events from the very beginning. Would 70 days be enough time for the wise men to see the sign of Christ's birth, to get to Jerusalem, talk to Herod, and be led to Bethlehem? Well, it depends on where they were journeying from, but it is entirely possible. It says that this comet hung in the air for 70 days. I find the number 70 also interesting from a biblical numerology standpoint. 70 represents sharing the good news to the world. That is why we have a quorum of the 70. What could be better news to the world than that of the Christ child coming to save mankind from death and hell? Whether the supernova created the Star of Bethlehem, or if it was a temporary planetary conjunction, or a comet that was actually the Star of David, we may never know in this life. But what do you think?